late too. That's the other reason.
Good afternoon. There we go, little furniture moving, tradition.
We'll make ourselves at home.
It is great to be here as, one of the, it's the third event that we have in the series for Inauguration Week. The theme for this inauguration is Rooted in Legacy, Growing Our Future. And the purpose of the panel that we have here today is to remind us of some of the traditions, some of the people that came before us that set us up for success, that we can move forward to growing into the future, right? They are the gifts from the past that we are the beneficiaries of. One of the defining qualities of Monmouth is the many rich traditions and rituals. And some of those have to do with our heritage, and some are new. And we're going to hear about lots of those today. I will tell you, and some of you have heard this story, when Jeff and I left Monmouth, we would go to ceremonies, and it was about a year and a half into being in Ohio that we were like, there's something flat about this graduation. What is it? And then we realized it was the bagpipes were missing. There is something, I'm like, there's no closure. Like, what is it? And it took us about a year and a half to figure out, like, doesn't everybody have bagpipes at football games? Apparently not. But we have other traditions here, and some of the traditions have reflect the era that they came from, or reflecting a particular moment in time, or something that happened in the larger society. But the characteristics among all of them is that they were handed down from one generation to the next generation, and it unites us. A few weeks ago, we had a legacy luncheon for during our family week, and I asked folks what were some of their favorite traditions. Some of them was Greek Life Day, some was Scots Day, and I think those were the top two. But definitely kilts and bagpipes were way up there on people's list from across decades. Today we have 4 individuals who have been with us for a while and have passed on some of the traditions or enjoyed some of the traditions. I'm not quite sure what they're each going to say, but I know we'll have interesting perspectives. And one of the folks the folk that is going to kick us off is Jeff Rankin, who is the Monmouth College editor, our historian, the guy who answered my email all weekend long when I was getting ready for the inaugural address saying, what about this? When did this start, Jeff? And Jeff immediately answered. So the Rankins are a tradition at Monmouth, right? Jeff is a Monmouth native, his wife Terry's a Monmouth graduate, their daughter Amanda is a graduate, Jeff's twin brother Doug, several of you know, is an alumnus and a retired theater professor, and their late father Glenn was a 1943 graduate who led admissions and alumni program. And their family was honored in 2015 as the College Family of the Year. So Jeff is going to moderate the panel and also make some contributions. So I'll welcome Jeff to the podium.
Thank you, Pat. It's good to have some of you here to help us kind of go down memory lane. When I was asked by President Graves to moderate a panel discussion on our traditions, my first thought was that will be easy. Then I decided to jot down any traditions that came to mind, and almost immediately I saw that one tradition would trigger memories of another tradition, and eventually the list became unworkable. So given the constraints of our time frame, and to give our esteemed panelists a chance to reflect on their memories, I believe it's necessary to lay out some general rules. So I'm dividing our discussion into two broad areas. And the first concerns cherished traditions that were central to our past, but are probably not as relevant today. And the second concerns traditions that remain relevant and that we can possibly build on. So I'd like us to focus most of our discussion on that second group, but first I'd like to give a quick synopsis of some pretty cool traditions that somewhat sadly belong to the past. With this being homecoming week, I have a few personal recollections of Monmouth homecomings past, say 60 years ago, that I'd like to throw out. In those days, the parade was absolutely huge, and it was marked by amazing floats, perhaps a dozen or more, and fraternities would compete fiercely against one another to construct the most outrageous floats. A couple that come to mind, there was a Mississippi riverboat with a turning paddle wheel, there was a fire-breathing dragon, and after the parade, all the floats would be moved around the track at the football game, so they'd be there as kind of adding to the festivities. And you know, as a young kid in Monmouth, that was just an amazing experience. There's many reasons why this tradition really can't play today, and one being that fall break often occurs right before homecoming, and that would not allow the time necessary to build some of these floats, building chicken wire frames and stuffing napkins and all that sort of thing. But also the fierce rivalry between the Greek organizations have subsided somewhat, and students today have so many things competing for their time. And there's just not time for float building like there once was. You know, whether it's athletics or academics or whatever, students, every minute of their day is kind of full these days. So, so some long-standing traditions, such as hazing, are thankfully a thing of the past. One of those some of those involved dehumanizing freshmen, particularly the requirement of wearing a freshman cap. In the early days, freshmen wore beanies, but after the adoption of Scottish traditions, the caps became plaid Glengarry hats, and they were sewn by women in the community. They had to be worn at all times until halftime of the Knox football game, unless the freshmen won the pole scrap. And the pole scrap's another great piece of our ancient history. For decades, it was one of the highlights of the fall semester. No one knew when it would happen, but on a given morning, the steam whistle on the old heating plant would sound and announce it to the community. And I mean, the community showed up. Dozens and maybe hundreds of community members wanted to be there to witness the pole scrap. And basically, it involved, it was in those days when there was a fierce rivalry between the freshman and the sophomore class. A telephone pole would be erected in front of what is now Polling Hall. It would be greased, and then the sophomore colors would be placed at the top, and it was up to the sophomores to defend their colors against the wily freshmen, and the freshmen would try all kinds of tricks to try to get at the pole and climb it and get the colors down. And if they succeeded, it was a glorious thing because they could stop wearing their freshman caps immediately. So there was a big incentive, and sometimes it didn't happen that often, but sometimes it did. And you know, it was a risky business. The men climbing the pole had put like adhesive tape around their legs and sort of things to keep their pants on. But it was, you know, it was an amazing tradition. But finally, in the 50s, it was considered a bit too rough. There were some serious injuries, and so it was discontinued. I mentioned the steam whistle blowing, and that has an interesting history. The first whistle was supposedly procured from an old Mississippi riverboat, and after that was stolen, another was obtained from an old threshing machine. And in the early days, the steam whistle was used to call students to chapel, another beloved tradition that probably is best gone, along with the requirement that you had to pass a swimming test before you could graduate. But anyway, most memorably about the whistle, the firemen in the steam plant would blow the whistle after football and basketball games to count out the score of the Scots victory. So people in town didn't have to go to the game to know what the score was. The whistle would also announce the start of the May Fete, that's F-E-T-E. It was another tradition from the past. For decades on May Day, there would be a celebration held in the Valley Beautiful, which actually is where the parking lot south of McMichael Dorm is today. And it was a huge production. A maypole would be erected. There would be a dance with the winding of the maypole and all these young women dressed in amazing costumes. And then there'd be other groups of women dancers dressed in costumes of different lands and that sort of thing. And then finally, it culminated in the crowning of the May Queen and her Chancellor. And that was a big deal. As you know, also there's a number of boulders adorning the campus. And most of them are memorials from early graduating classes. They, they didn't have a lot of money to give as senior gifts, so they went out to Cedar Creek and dredged up some big limestone boulders. And if you look closely, they do have their class years engraved on them. Now, one boulder originally bore the engraving of an octopus, but it was smashed by vandals in 1987, so a granite stone was placed there. You can still see it today. It's got an octopus engraved on it with 1928. And that was the year that the Octopus Society was originally constituted. That was, it was originally to be a men's senior honor society similar to one at Yale, which was called the Elihu Club. And it was to operate as an alumni organization through which graduates could continue to exert an influence on the development of the college, primarily through fundraising. They figured some of these campus leaders would one day be capable of making gifts to the college. And they were secretly chosen, members were secretly chosen by the senior class and installed in an annual meeting held on the eve of commencement. And there'd be 8 members of the junior class who were selected each year based on their contribution to the school, their personality, and their prospect for future achievement. So being members of a secret society with no specific duties or goals was perhaps predictable that the efforts of the octopi would eventually turn to mischief. And although it was never proven, they were accused of burning the Mayfet platform, stealing athletic trophies, and putting oil on the Siegfried platform. And that was in the early 40s, but because they were an exclusive club, resentment among non-members grew intense. And things came to a head on the evening of March 5th, 1942, when 7 members of the club accidentally broke the glass on the west entrance to Wallace Hall around midnight and were confronted by the night watchman. A scuffle ensued, and the watchman reportedly drew a knife, resulting in an injury to 3 of the members. When the boys showed up at Monmouth Hospital for treatment, the Monmouth police were there to greet them. The following week, the Student Government Association voted to ask the administration to rehire the watchman who had been dismissed following the incident. And soon thereafter, the faculty passed a resolution that all societies with secret membership be banned from campus. One of those members who got stabbed in an unseemly part of his body was our future Medal of Honor winner, Bobby Dunlap, who went on to Iwo Jima. And it was the club was reorganized after World War II. Still kind of a secret society. Then it kind of faded away from sight, but it was kind of, we believe it still exists. And it's now a co-ed organization, so we'll see where the future of the Octopus Club comes. Well, those are a few interesting excerpts from our past, but now let's focus on traditions that are still going strong that help define our institution. The most obvious is celebrating our Scottish heritage, and that tradition dates to 1928 when Monmouth joined the Midwest Conference and needed a nickname for its athletic teams, which it had never had. The students voted to adopt the name Bulldogs, but the new alumni secretary who just graduated in 1927 was Harold Herman, and he had a sense of Monmouth's Presbyterian heritage and thought we need to have something more distinctive for Monmouth College, so he coined the name Fighting Scots. And that, by the way, is today a registered trademark of Monmouth College. There were about a dozen other colleges and high schools that now have Fighting Scots, but we were the first, and we're the official one. But anyway, Harold Herman also adopted the red and white tartan that we used to have after the Mingus clan. And he brought the first bagpiper to campus from Chicago. And he was the one that replaced the freshman beanie with a tartan cap. And then under Professor Hal Loya, a few years later, the bagpipe band really grew into an institution. It actually marched in the parade with the marching band. And the marching band, too, is significant. In 2025, it will celebrate its centennial on campus. It was organized in 1925. So that might be something that the college might consider celebrating and maybe using as a recruiting point for musicians. And then there was also an active Highland dancing group that existed in the 60s and 70s. Then in the 1990s, under the leadership of President Sue Huseman, bagpipe scholarships were introduced, and this allowed the college to recruit some really high-quality pipers and drummers, and they actually competed nationwide at some of the major competitions. It was also during this time that the college commissioned a new tartan, a red, white, and black tartan that is actually registered as the Monmouth College tartan, and it was received its blessing from the Lord Lion in Scotland, and then the college's old red and white plaid became the ancient colors, while the new tartan are the modern colors. So I'd like to begin by asking our panelists, what is the significance of our Scottish heritage and its importance to our students and alumni, as well as to our institutional image, and what areas might we focus on that would expand that, make it more vibrant and maybe more meaningful to our current students. So do any of you have any thoughts? I guess I'll pass this over there.
And make sure you introduce yourselves.
Yeah, right.
Oh, sure, I'll go first. I'm Stacy Lopes. I'm in the art department, and I've been at Monmouth for 28 years this year. And I have to say that when I started here, you know, I hadn't had this kind of a liberal arts experience as a college student myself, because I went to a big state school, and then to an even bigger school for graduate school. And so when I came here, the traditions that were like the bagpipes and the tartan and Scots Day, you know, kind of a flunk day, which is now a Scholars Day, but our Wiley students have kind of reintroduced it with a Scots Eve event. So we can't stop them from having fun. And I think that that's a good thing. But one of the things that I realized about all of those things was that those pieces, the bagpipes, the tartans, you know, a flunk day of sorts, were the things that made this place a community. And it wasn't just for the students, it was for the faculty as well. You know, we were all involved in it. And we still are. And I feel like that was such a shift for me, coming from a whole different system, university system. And it was so welcoming. And I think it's part of the thing that still keeps me so engaged in this place. And I think, you know, when I travel, when I tell people, you know, where I work, you know, I worked on the East Coast for a while, and I mentioned Monmouth College, and there were Kappas that I was working with, and they said, oh, we know all about Monmouth College. And then they actually told me about this being the birthplace of the Kappas, and so I got to know a little bit about that. But then they immediately said, oh, that's the school with bagpipes. You're so lucky. And they said, do all the students know how to play them? And I said, no, they do not. There's a few select ones that can do it. But, you know, I think we kind of take for granted those things, but I think those are the things that really hold us together. And I think that even our young alums, they look forward when videos are posted on Instagram and Facebook that have the bagpipes playing, immediately the flood of reactions is, oh, those pipes, you know, and I think we're really, really lucky that we carry this tradition on and that it means so much. And I think that we forget how important that is sometimes.
So my name is Jennifer Steinberg. I am an alum. I graduated in 2010, and I've worked here maybe 11 or 12 years. I don't really know. And I just, when I heard that question, the first thought that came to mind was the first time I heard the bagpipes. And it was actually, because back in the day we had ringtones. When I was in college, we all had ringtones. Now all phones are silent. But we all had ringtones, and one of my friends had it as their ringtone. And I remember, and I was a transfer student, so I came in as a junior, and so I did not have the same type of orientation to college as some of our students do, right? I didn't have I didn't participate in orientation or the walkout, right? Those were bad choices on my end, I know. But I remember hearing those bagpipes on her phone and being like, what the heck is your ringtone? What are you listening to? Because most of mine were always music or something like that. And she just looked at me funny. She's like, they're the bagpipes. What do you mean? And then, of course, she explained to me what this was, right? And I was slow in getting into this, I understand. But ever since then, they've been a part of my identity as a Fighting Scot, as a member of this community. And I think that also expands beyond here, kind of like what you were saying with people who I run into randomly when I'm wearing a Monmouth College shirt. They're like, oh, I know that place, right? Or I'll run into random alums when I'm out. You know, we travel to Wisconsin quite a lot as a family and see people. And people will come up to you like, I know that place. You know, you are the place that, you know, you have the Fighting Scots, you have the bagpipes, you have the tartan. And it's so much a part of our identity and so much a part of who we are. And it's incredibly important, I think, for us to carry on that tradition with our current students so that they can realize, you know, what it's like to be a part of this community too.
No,
It's still good. Hi, Tom Sargent, professor in educational study. I too have been around campus for 20 plus years. I'm also a graduate of Monmouth College. So I graduated in '85 from the institution, and you know the bagpipes. We talk about those, but you know they always signal something eventful. They're always a signal of something that is about to happen that you should be looking forward to. And I think about them because the first time I ever heard them was when I did matriculation on Walsall Plaza. And to me, I had never been a part of anything like that. And you know, I think back about traditions of the college. You know, we have these wonderful bookends. You know, matriculation to start and commencement to complete. And the signaling and the playing of the bagpipes, of the pomp and circumstance that surround that. I think that goes back to part of who we are, part of our identity. And I think the bagpipes add to that identity. I also think that's a major part of our mission, right? About creating a caring community for the students, and it happens on the first day, and it happens on their final day as a resident of our community. And so I think those are important traditions that we continue to put out there and put in place.
All right, well, thank you. I think they all spoke pretty eloquently to how we all feel about bagpipes. Now, since this is homecoming, I'd like to ask, you know, what are some of your memories of past homecomings and what traditions could we build up upon? For example, in years past, there was a bonfire on Friday night, but we lost any space to do that. So it was replaced with a spirit shout and fireworks. And fireworks isn't an inexpensive enterprise, but should it be retained? And as difficult as it is to organize a homecoming parade in these days, is it feasible to continue it? And how might that be improved? Or any other ideas, thoughts you have about homecoming of the future?
I'll take this one because I like it. Parade needs to be expanded, folks. Where can we go further, right? Those days of individuals, the bonding that happened working on building those floats, stuffing those little pieces of paper, you know, the napkins in the chicken wire and twisting it just right. There was something to that, right? There was a lot of bonding that happened during that type of a situation. Yeah, we're all busy, but if it's an important part of what we do and the learning that occurs, it's there. I learned about what classes to take and what classes not to take while building a float, you know? I said, oh, you need to be ready for this, right? And so I think that's an important part of what we do. The bonfire, when I was a student here, we still had bonfire. It was up on the side. But the spirit shout was always another good time, right? The spirit shout brought some of the rivalry between the fraternities and the sororities together, paired in that type of situation, and it's a good time. So I think, you know, those types of things should continue. Fireworks, they're nice, they're expensive, but again, it adds something new and different to the occasion of what's happening. We were talking just before we got started today that we try to do so much on Saturday in one day to celebrate homecoming. Not that I'm trying to say, but maybe we need to look at making it a little bit longer in events like this so that we have a celebration of the week. And as a longtime I&I instructor, ILA instructor, you know, we used to have convocation, and then we brought it in for homecoming, and we brought alumni back for them to talk about their experience. Again, the students, especially the new students to our community, they enjoy that. So this type of conversation would happen during there, so they begin to understand some of the oral traditions and some of the oral history of Monmouth College. So yeah, those types of things are important.
Other?
Hey, Deb, I have a comment.
Yeah.
If I can
Yeah.
take my privilege. Last night's event was a picnic for students with the president. So I went around and asked students, you know, what can't I miss at this homecoming? And they really said two things. One was the spirit shout, right? And some of the bonding that, I forget which groups or which paired up, but you know, the Kappas are with the baseball team. I was like, well, that should be interesting, and I might have that mixed up. And so another sorority is with the soccer team, and they're coming up with dance and music, and they're like, it's a pretty interesting week in collaboration of different skill sets moving forward. And then a new tradition, the boat regatta. So you want to say anything about that?
I'm not that versed on it, so if anybody else does, but it's neat from what I've seen.
So students build boats, and do they actually get in the boat?
Yes.
Yeah, because, you know, I talked to a bunch of our track, or I would say our field athletes. They were like, big guys, but they were like, we never get picked to go in the boat. There wasn't a guy under 250, you know, in the group. But they're like, we will build it. So those were the kind of two traditions that came up over and over again last night when I was asking students. And of course, the parade.
That's great. It's great that there are new traditions being brought forth because that's what it's all about. You got to remain relevant to the next generation. Now, since the early 20th century, Monmouth has begun its year with an unusual tradition known as the walkout. For many years, it was held at night, and the freshmen men and women would line up in pairs, and the leader would blow a whistle, and the one column would move up one, and in that way, freshmen men and women could get to know each other through the entire student body. There were a lot of variations of that over the years. And then it would head up Broadway, and again at night, and of course there were fraternity houses along the way. It would go through the fraternity houses. It would end up downtown. It would go through institutions like the Warren County Jail and the Rivoli Theater, and the lights would come up in the theater, and the class would be applauded. It would go through the dairy, all these kinds of good things. Then they would come back to campus, and they would have a watermelon bust perhaps on the old tennis court, and then end with a dance. And again, those things, over the years, the specifics changed. But by the early 1970s, students were more worried about Vietnam and oil crisis and a lot of other serious things. And this seemed kind of frivolous, and so that the tradition was lost at that point. It ended. And then again, during the 1990s, when President Huseman decided it was time to resurrect some of these traditions, she tasked me with resurrecting the walkout. So we began that year, and it was a little easier then because there were more businesses downtown than there are today. But still, the fun of it is, you know, having a police escort and a bagpiper and going up Broadway with the entire class, and then going through and getting goodies and coupons and all kinds of things from the merchants. So, you know, it's held during the daytime, but it's, you know, it's still a lot of fun. And of course, students who went on it as a freshman, as OLs or whatever, want to come back and do it again if they can. So anyway, I'd like to ask the panels, you know, what are your memories of the walkout, and what do you think? Do you think, despite the fact that we don't have, you know, a lot of business like we used to have downtown, can we continue to do it and make it relevant? So anybody remember the walkouts of past and what it meant?
Well, like I said earlier, I did not participate in my walkout, and I've always felt very sad about that, actually. Ever since I came back as an employee and been a part of it on that side of things, I'm like, oh, this was bad. I should have, you know, been a part of that. But I think absolutely it should continue. I think it is an incredible moment for our students to experience our community in a different way, and in a way that I don't think probably happens at a lot of different institutions. And it's a way for our community also to get to know the faces of our students. So when they're in and out of their stores and their shops and within the community, you know, they can know each other a little bit better, and students can feel a little bit better about the community they've entered in. So, you know, hopefully with the revitalization of, you know, downtown and the square, maybe some more businesses will shop or will, you know, come into play, and we'll have more people to participate, but it definitely should continue.
I'll just say too, that it's a great opportunity for them to see other than the businesses as well, right? So we have a lot of organizations, a lot of opportunities, and in our overall community, it's important for them to see that there's something for them to do outside. And so I think, you know, it needs to continue for that reason, that it's not always about what they're going to purchase, but or where they can go to find some food, but it's also where can I go to find an internship? Where can I go to look for an opportunity? Where do I go to find a pet, right? I need a emotional support animal. Where am I going to go to find that, right? So I think those types of opportunities are great for our students to see that too, because otherwise they may be insulated with the campus here and not have an opportunity to see what's beyond.
Great, so I think the consensus is the walkout will continue one way or the other. So another major annual event is Scott's Day, as President Graves mentioned, and today it's also celebrated in the spring as Scholars Day. In years past, a major spring event was Scott Olympics, and Mr. Whiteman in the back, I think, was responsible for getting that going back in the 60s. And that was a major spring event, primarily among the Greek organizations, but also independents. And they did everything, I mean, bicycle races that went 48 hours.
6 days and 1 hour.
Oh, yes.
Fred had a 6-day bike race, so we beat him by 1 hour. The women would keep the bike going at 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and the men would take the bike at 7 at night and ride it. We went 1,200 miles.
Wow.
And I think even in Tom's day, it was still going with the, like, wheelbarrow races, all kinds of different things.
And I don't, again, it was changing at that time, right? So, and it was at an era in the 80s where Scott Olympics then became Scott's Day, then it was a surprise type situation, you never knew. And as a faculty on this side now, I can see how devastating that would be, because in the spring, it was as soon as it was nice out, students stopped preparing for classes because, oh, don't you know, tomorrow's gonna be Scott's Day. Who knows when it's gonna be Scott's Day, right? The Babcocks gonna play, we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna do these Olympic type activities, we're gonna have a fun time. But then the pre-gaming type situations occurred, and so then students were, oh, it's not Scott's Day today. Oh, I guess I'm gonna have that test tomorrow in my class. Oh, and it's like, how do you plan for those things, right? So it did become a major disruption, I think, to the educational process. And now the transition that we've gone to, which is, the students do have opportunities to have fun. We don't want to keep them to have fun, but we use that Scott's Day now to celebrate their academic life and the achievements that many of those students are doing, not only as individuals that are transitioning from our population, but also those individuals that are new to our community, right? So the good work that they've already started doing, we celebrate that with Scholars Day and the varieties of things. Scholars Day started out with poster sessions about presentations for a variety of different things, and now has incorporated, productions and art and all sorts of different pieces with it. So it's really expanded and goes over well. And I think our students, again, look forward to that opportunity to showcase the hard work that they've been doing during the course of the academic year.
So I don't know if this is a tradition yet, but it might become one. So I started a year ago with my sculpture class when they were in the springtime, when they start getting a little squirrely and they don't really want to do a lot of work. We started going outside and having relay races. And they're like, what are we doing? I said, divide yourselves up, we're going to have a relay race. One of you go down to that end, you know how to do a relay race? And they're like, well, yeah, but really? That's what we're doing? And I said, yeah, that's what we're doing. And so we did a relay race. Oh, then they got all fired up. They were all, and it was always girls against the boys. The girls always won. And of course, the boys said the girls are cheating. And then, so the relay race has now morphed itself into a hopscotch relay race. I have these giant circles that we lay out in the form of 2 hopscotches. We divide up into teams, and then we do a relay. That went over so well that I've been doing that with my freshmen in our I&I class on days when they're really not prepared for discussion. We're going outside. We did this, we had a field day with hopscotch racing. Again, the girls beat the boys, but of course they were cheating. The boys in the I&I class have demanded that there be a rematch for the hopscotch relay. And I'll just have to pull it out of nowhere. But they get so excited over going outside and racing each other. And I think that that's a testament to the fact that we sometimes forget that they want to have fun. And so doing something kind of silly like that with them, they really enjoy it. And they get to know each other, and they're high-fiving each other, and they're like really communicating with one another. And I think that that's what we do well here, is that kind of community building. But who knew that a relay race, now with this, I've only done this now 3 times, so I don't know that it'll become a tradition. But I see great power in this very small thing that happens with them, and that they get really excited about it. And I think that that's similar to, when we've had Scott's games and done other kinds of somewhat competitive but fun events for them. And I often feel like we take ourselves sometimes a little bit too serious. And we need a day every once in a while where we're just out having fun, even if it's only for a half an hour. And when my freshmen left after the races a few weeks ago, I could hear them outside of the building saying, that was the best day ever. It was only a hopscotch race. It's a small thing. It's a small thing.
I'd like to mention too, we've had some other springtime traditions, and one, these folks might remember out in the quad, which used to be called People's Park, there would be all kinds of fun things, the Synthetic Equinox, we'd have bands playing on the library terrace, and it just became kind of a mini Woodstock. Do you guys want to mention any memories you have of that?
The only memory I really remember that stood out was there was this little girl from the town, and she was maybe 8 years old, and she would come and dance, and we'd watch her, and she was kind of not attached to any adult. She was kind of hanging around on her own with college students. And this is 50-some years ago, and after I moved back to Monmouth 20 years ago, I've been wondering if I could figure out who she is, and whatever became of her, you know.
Great memories. And then, again, when we were trying to kind of revive some of our Scottish traditions, I think this was late 90s, we started a thing called Kaylee, which was Scottish games, and we actually tried to do the caber throw and different things like that. It was somewhat successful, but it was a lot of work, and especially at that time of year, people are busy. And then later we brought in like inflatables, we had casino games, that sort of thing, which was fun. But I like the more organic stuff that
I've got
it
the
just
brains
becomes.
over in the studio.
Yeah, right.
I could divide you all up together.
Okay, well, in a few weeks we'll be celebrating the 134th football meeting between Knox and Monmouth, known as the Turkey Bowl. It will be played at Knox, and Monmouth has won 24 straight. There's still the Bronze Turkey Trophy, but it isn't trotted out that often. And heck, the hated Siwash are now the Prairie Fire with a fox as a mascot. So for decades, there were creative pranks pulled off, such as Monmouth burning a big M onto the Knox football field. But those days seem to be gone. The Knox-Monmouth football rivalry is still the second oldest west of the Alleghenies, but circumstances make me wonder how much longer in the future the Turkey rivalry will remain relevant. What, if anything, can we do to stoke interest in this fall classic? Any thoughts?
First thing, if the turkey got stolen again, that wouldn't be interesting, right? It was missing for so long, nobody could find it. The stories that go behind, right, under lock and key, and then all of a sudden, how does it disappear? Well, how can it disappear if it's under lock and key? There's always the insider that has information about how that happens. I think it's relevant. I think, football is still part of the national pastime, and I think it's important to our students. They don't understand it when they come, but after they've experienced it, I think that it's something that is important to the identity of the institution. And it's definitely, I think, a part of what alumni look forward to, right? If there's not anything else that they know about football, they know to look to see what happened with the Knox-Monmouth game.
I will just add, I think that one of my favorite memories that I think of when I think of my time as a student here came from a Turkey Bowl game, and it was at Knox actually this year. And I remember my friends and I went over, we ate at Buffalo Wild Wings, and then we went over to the game. And this fence was kind of in our way. It was a really tall fence at Knox. And we decided we were not going to walk around this fence, so we were going to climb over it. And so I got my friend Kayla up and over, and then it was my turn, and I get stuck at the very top. I mean, this is a really tall fence. And I get stuck at the top, and of course my jeans snag, and I just rip my jeans down the side, and for the rest of the day, and running around with a sweatshirt tied around my waist. Still having a ball, still having a fun time, enjoyed rooting for the Fighting Scots, who of course won the game, and just the camaraderie around those sporting events, and being with your friends and cheering on your team. I think that's a test of time. It'll always be relevant, and always be just a fun time for students. And I just remember all of us getting together and carpooling over there, and we actually ate at Buffalo Wild Wings twice that day for lunch together. I remember that, but it's still one of my favorite memories.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call out, I talked to you about, the theme of the inauguration, those that came before us. We're lucky in the room, Dick and Sandy Kesey are here. So Dick, I'm kind of curious on the Turkey Bowl, was there anything special, rivalries between presidents or anything at that time?
Yeah, there was a bet, but I can't remember what it was anymore. But the one thing about reinstating the rivalry is if you've won it 24 years in a row, it's not really a rivalry. I do remember one year when we were here that Knox and Monmouth played like 20-some events in athletics, and Monmouth won every one. I'd like to know what year that was again, but that was one of the really amazing things. A couple traditions that are really important to this place is that people like Jeff come here and come from a family and they spend their whole life here. The fact, and we've got examples of people here that have come and spent their life. And that's pretty amazing. And then the other thing that's very amazing is that the dedication of alumni, and that, Sandy and I reminisced and walked around this building. And it was so much fun to see the names of all the people that have given, that were active when we were here. We left, they built the building, and their names are still active. So there's a loyalty here that's not at all places. And you should all be proud of that. That it is a special place.
Very nice.
Jeff,
Jeff,
didn't the presidents on the Turkey Bowl, whoever won, there was a thing with giving turkeys?
Yeah, the food banks between Monmouth and Knox, we give turkeys or whatever, yeah.
I don't know if they still do.
I think they quit doing that after COVID.
Oh.
Why don't you do that? The Knox president's
I have
coming
two
tomorrow.
things on the Knox game, one of which I'm not too proud to do. The bronze turkey in the student center, we had won. The bronze turkey was on display. Student came in when I was student center director. A young student came in, said he was a freshman from Monmouth. He was supposed to be writing up the history of the Monmouth-Knox game, and could he take a picture of the bronze turkey? Well, you sure? Well, it's reflecting on the glass. Can we take it out of the thing? Yeah, well, how about, it's still pretty dark in here, can we take it outside? Yeah, well, that was and I got a phone call, and that was the last we saw of the turkey. But the guy that got it from me was Robert Hansen, the master spy, who was a Knox graduate. And I wrote to him while he was in prison. And told him another time, another place, I'd buy him a beverage of his choice. He didn't get the letter. He doesn't even get mail. The guy got 20 of our people killed. The other Knox bronze turkey, the Octopus Club. The night before the Knox-Monmouth basketball game, the Octopus Club, the mother of one of our members made a big sheet with an octopus on it. We crawled out on the girders in the gymnasium at 3 o'clock in the morning and wrapped it up. We were going to drop it in the middle of the Knox game. And I was the full guy that's supposed to drop it. Well, that turkey, that sheet disappeared. That we got beat at our home game. They stole that sheet with the turkey on it, so we never did. We got beat at our home game. One of our guys, one of our Octopus members, was a member of the FBI secret honorary or whatever. He was one of the ones that got conned on that too. So. But a lot of history there. Well, okay. I've been on this campus for over 97 years. The Octopus Club its main purpose was to develop student spirit. Grill Hall has a telephone system in there where the duty girl could buzz the room. They all had individual things that you could buzz the room. Octopus Club, we got in there and we put toothpicks in every one of those. So every phone in the Grill Hall was ringing, and when they came down to the lobby, there was a beat Knox sign there.
Well, you gotta write a book. Back to football, I'd like to make a personal appeal to bring back a tradition. And as you know, the legendary Monmouth College cannon that was returned to campus in 1953 after having spent half a century at the bottom of Cedar Creek was restored to firing condition in 1996. And for a time, it was pulled on a trailer in the homecoming parade, and then it would be fired at football games after touchdowns. Then conference noisemaker rules brought this to an end, you know, we couldn't fire the cannon at all, and then it got kind of put away where it wasn't even really visible. So, you know, but we can get around that. It doesn't have to be fired after touchdowns. It could be fired before the game, after the game, at halftime. And let's put it somewhere visible on campus where people can enjoy the history of it, because it's got an amazing history with signage. And let's bring it back, parade, make it part of our tradition again. It's not just a personal appeal, but anyway. So there's a lot of other things, you know, I would love to discuss. I think the Monmouth Duo is one thing we don't promote enough. We're known nationwide for being birthplace of Hi Phi and Kappa. I'd love to see a monument on campus to Monmouth Duo, something like that, because it could be a recruiting tool. The marching band I mentioned, we used to have a thing called the Crimson Clan, and this was a volunteer organization in the community, mostly retired women, but there were men in it. And they would organize, they would help do mailings, they would organize receptions, that sort of thing. It was a way for, a lot of them were like spouses of faculty or retired people or just community members, and it gave them sort of a connection to the college throughout the year. So I think that's something we might think about. Another thing, Stockdale Center recently rededicated. I remember fondly the place in the basement called the Sticks, which was sort of a coffee shop, and it was called the Sticks because we had an underground river running under there, like the River Styx. But anyway, back in the 70s, there were caricatures of all the students on the walls. There was a hangout, you know, there was a jukebox, there was a fast order, you could order burgers or whatever, and it was open on weekends. So I think students would really appreciate having a spot on campus that is sort of a hangout where they could, you know, make it kind of their own, personalize it with things on the walls, that sort of thing. And we have that to some extent, but I'd like to see it become even more of a hangout. So just a few thoughts, and I think, you know, we're probably about at the end of our time. Is there anybody in the audience that had some ideas? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Tom was talking about extending homecoming to not just the Saturday, but trying to have other events. One thing that my husband and I really enjoyed up until maybe 10 years ago was the Friday before homecoming. Some of the professors would sign up to allow guests to come to their classes and sit in, and usually intro classes or ILA classes, but parents would come and alumni like us, members of the community, and we really, really enjoyed it. And I think that would also be a good recruiting tool, just to see what goes on in classes. Yeah, I wish they'd bring that back.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I thank you for your attention. I think it's been enjoyable just to reminisce and think about where we've come from and where we might be going, and really celebrating what's become, you know, what has made Monmouth College so special to generations of alumni. And I think it's definitely going to continue. So thank you.